Hi everybody, thanks for joining me today. I'm Ruth Knight, the Director of the Pillars of Best Practice, and today we're going to have a little bit fun playing Mythbusters. Yay! So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to dispel some of the myths and give you some great tips and strategies to create better success in your organisation. Would you like more success in your organisation? I'm sure that you would. So I hope that you've grabbed yourself a cup of tea or coffee, turned off your phone and closed the door, because this is going to be some great information for you today. So get your pen and paper handy also, and make sure that you take some notes. Okay, so let's just think about change for a moment. Is there change going on in your organisation? Well, I would take a good guess there is, because if there isn't, then you really need to look at why not. You won't be growing and you won't be successful if there isn't any change. I mean, there is a lot of change happening around today, isn't there? In fact, they say that the only certainty there is change, because change is just growing at such a phenomenal rate. It's just everywhere you look around you in society today, there is change happening all the time. Now let's look at some of the facts. I mean, firstly, we have demographic changes, we have population growth, increased urbanisation. We have a great widening divide, I suppose, between the youth of today and the very quickly aging populations. And there's a rapidly growing middle class that are not only reshaping the business world, but also society as a whole. There's lots more social issues and disadvantage in our country. We have lots of things that we need to address as a sector, but with greater communications and technology than ever before. So the world is at our fingertips. I mean, we hear news as it happens today, and that's because of the change in terms of communications and technology. We are used to knowing things fast and being able to address things fast. So globalization has now made our sector and working as a general a 24-hour business. The median number of years that people stay with their current employer is about 7 years in Australia. So people are constantly on the move, not only from business to business, but even career-wise as well. People have multiple career changes within their lifetime. So we are constantly learning and finding out about new initiatives and new things happening. And as an organisation, if you're not keeping up with all those changes, then you may find that you are not going to be sustainable. The growth of the non-profit sector has been phenomenal in the last 30 years. I mean, we now as a sector have a turnover of 75 billion, and our non-profit organisations account for 4.9% of Australia's gross domestic product. So we are a massive sector. In fact, nearly 1 million people are employed within the non-profit sector. And so with such growth of staff, and not just staff, volunteers as well, and our donors and our funders and even our clients, they're wanting much more from the non-profit sector with this growth, and a lot more accountability. And innovation is necessary to keep up with the changes and to adapt. And I would say that it's one of the key things for your organisation to be sustainable, is to make sure that you are adaptable to the changes, because you do not want to get left in the dark ages. Because if you do, or if you even stand still for a few moments and don't keep up to date with what's going on in the sector and society as a whole, you will go out of existence. So I would say that change is one of the biggest things that you as a leader and as someone who works in a non-profit organisation, this is what you need to think very carefully about. So John Cotter, who's a guru in the area of change, he said no organisation is immune to change. So pull your head out of the sand. We can't deny that it happens. You know it's happening. We just need to learn how to cope with change and how to manage change in a much better way, because change can be very destructive as well. The third sector is now becoming a more turbulent environment than ever before, with funding crises around the world, world and the financial crisis globally, and managers are facing increasing pressure to implement their goals because of this a need to be more accountable and transparent, and needing more money to do what they want to do. So while no organisation is immune to change, managing change is considered one of the greatest challenges that you would face as a leader, because it is so complex and it's so hard to work through. Basically, in fact, they've looked at this in the for-profit sector, and they've realised that about 70% of change initiatives ends in failure. Because the concept of change is so complex, it's fraught with messiness, because it involves people, I suppose. And so, the whole idea of managing change is very scary for some people. And if you don't get your head around this, it will really be hard work for you. So understanding change and managing change is one of the best things that you can do for your organisation. It's going to mean so much more for you personally, but also obviously for your organisation. So if you're going to embrace change within your organisations, it's absolutely critical that you know how to do it right, that you take a considered and formal approach to change, and you understand what could go wrong. Okay, so there's a lot of risk management that needs to be happening. But I just wanted to have a look at some of the key myths that I suppose are floating around. People talk about change all the time, or they have their own perceptions of how change should be managed. But, I wanted to look at some of the myths that I hear, because I talk to people a lot about change all the time. It's my PhD subject, so it's a subject that's very close to my heart, and I know that it's important to you. So let's have a look at some of the myths. Well, the first one that is I hear all the time is that we don't need to manage change. We'll just kind of let it happen. People will figure it out, or, it's not such a big deal. We don't have time to do any planning. We're just trying to keep up with what we've got to do. We don't have time to sit down and think about how to manage change. I mean, unfortunately, that's what I hear all the time. And it's very frustrating, but it's also very sad, because really, if you don't plan and you don't manage this, and I mean, you can't manage everything. I mean, obviously, you can't sort of say you don't know exactly how things are going to go and how people are going to react. But if you don't spend time planning and thinking about how things might go and actually having a strategy, how on earth are you going to be successful? I mean, if you just look at any type of game, you don't win your game by just standing around and hoping the ball comes your way. I mean, it would be absolutely crazy for a football team, for instance, to do that and just think, oh, well, we'll just hope that the ball goes in the right direction. I mean, you just wouldn't. You plan as a team and you think about, well, look, if the ball goes here, what do we do in that situation? If the ball goes over here, what would we do in that situation? You strategize and you think about what could go wrong, what could go right, how do we work together, what's our goal, where we want to get in the ball. I mean, all of those types of questions are absolutely critical for a team who's playing sport. And I think there's some great analogies there, because we also need to be doing that. Again, you only have to look at, how elite sportsmen and teams think. They think about game plans and strategies, and then they actually practice and build on their strengths. So they don't wait until the actual game to see if it all figures out. They actually put into practice what they're thinking and strategizing, so that when the real thing happens, when the Saturday night game comes, they're fully prepared because they've practiced their strategy. They've worked together as a team. They've got high morale. They've got a great mindset. They believe it's going to work. And so I think we really need to think a lot about how we should be like elite sportsmen and elite teams in the sports arena, and think about what they do and say, well, should we be doing that in our organisation? Should we be spending much more time planning and strategizing what we're doing, so that when change has to happen, or when we start to implement change, we're ready for it, we've thought about how it can go right as much as possible. I mean, again, you can't know what everything's going to happen, but you can plan for the worst and for the best. And you know, I know that we're doing a webinar today, but when I think about, you know, if I'd invited you to a room today to come and hear this webinar, you know, where would you have sat in the room? Just think about it now. I mean, if you walk into a room, what do? You scan around, don't you? Just visualize yourself now coming into a room, scanning the room and thinking about, where am I going to sit? Now, lots of things go through your mind about where you'd like to sit. You usually like to sit in good view of the screen. Okay, especially if you've got poor eyesight, you know, you might want to sit a bit closer, or you might want to sit at the back because you don't like to be right at the front. Or it might be that you want to sit with your friends because you want to feel comfortable with the people that you're sitting with. Or it might be that you want to sit near the window because you like some fresh air and you like natural light. Okay, all of those things are going through your mind as you walk into the room. And so you pick the best spot for you. You don't think to yourself, oh, where am I going to feel not very, you know, a bit awkward? Where am I going to, you know, not feel very comfortable? Let's sit where I'm going to challenge myself. You don't do that. You absolutely don't do that. You go into a room and you think, I'm going to sit where I feel comfortable. Okay, and that's because us as natural human beings, we want to be comfortable. We want to feel safe. We want to feel, you know, that happy. You know, we don't really like all that challenging stuff if we don't have to do it. You know, we tend to choose being comfortable. But if I then, once you've chosen your ideal seat where you feel really comfortable and you're settled and you're with your friends and you're, you know, with good view of the screen, what if I then wanted you to change seats? You know, how would you feel? Well, you know, if I had an agenda in mind and I knew why I wanted you to change seats, you may trust me enough to say, oh, well, you know, Ruth's decided that she wants us to change seats. But I can't just hope that you'll change seats. I actually have to ask you to change seats because you're comfortable. You know, you've chosen the spot that you wanted to sit in, and there's no reason for you to change your seat. But if I think in my head, look, I'd really like them to change around and meet some new people and do an activity, then I actually have to ask you to change seats. I need to strategize about how I'm going to get you to change seats. I've got to involve you. And I've got to gain your trust, because if you don't trust me, or you think that there's a hidden agenda, or you know that you don't want to move because it's going to, you know, challenge you too much, you might just say no to me. And then that's going to like throw all my plans. So I've really got to think about how I want you in this group to change seats and really get involved in my workshop. And I need to plan how to make you feel so comfortable that you trust me and want to do what I ask you to do. Because if I don't manage that process, what do you think's going to happen? Or I'm going to just presume that you'll say no to me. So there's absolutely no point in me just coming into a room of people and saying, okay guys, I just want you to switch places. I've got to build that trust, that rapport. I've got to explain myself. So, you know, I don't want, me to come in to a room where I'm trying to do a workshop and for people to not like me, because I will get resistance, because you will start to think, nah, I don't want to do this and I'm not enjoying this workshop. So I've really just explained that as a bit of an analogy as well about what we're doing in the workplace. That you as a leader, if you're in any type of leadership role, you know, you have a team of people, whether that's staff or volunteers, and you're asking them to do things. You can't just imagine that they're going to do it. You actually have to ask them to do things. But have you created the environment where they trust you and where you have some rapport with them, and where when you ask them to do what you say, they do it happily and they're excited about change? Because if they're not excited about change, they'll either say no, or they'll do it in a very grumpy manner, and they won't then participate in whatever you're trying to do. So it's really important for you to gain a relationship, a positive and a good relationship with your staff and volunteers. There was a tracking global trends report, and it looked at 6 broad long-term developments that are shaping our world. And they found that being strategic about change was one of the most important factors for successful organisations. The quote is, that these, and they looked at companies that succeed may find themselves not just navigating tomorrow's global trends, but actually shaping them. And I want to ask you, are you shaping the trends and the innovations in the non-profit sector and in your organisation? Are you actually not just sort of, drowning in the sea of change, but are you actually, forging the way ahead? Are you allowing your staff to be innovative and to really think about how that they can approach change in a really positive and exciting way? There's no doubt that trying to make changes at work is very hard, and it sometimes feels like absolutely impossible. Like, how are we going to do this? We've got to make some changes in this organisation, but I just don't know if we can do it. Peter Drucker, who's also an expert on governance and management, he once said that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And to me, that means that we've got to understand change and plan what it is that we're trying to do. You just can't leap off the side of a mountain and hope for the best. These little guys here who are just about to jump off this snowy mountain here, I can only imagine what's going through their head. I mean, they've got up there, so a little bit of excitement is going on in their brains, and they're probably really, their adrenaline is going, and they're saying, can we do this? But look at the tracks of people that have been there before them. Are they thinking that they will follow those tracks, or are they thinking that they're going to forge a new way, a better way of coming down the mountain, and a safer way? Because at the end of the day, when we're going through change, we do want it to be a safe environment for people. We don't want to cause any casualties along the way, because casualties, it burns out people, it burns out organisations. If change is not done well, there can be an awful lot of terrible circumstances that can happen. So we really need to make sure that our organisations are safe and our people are safe when we go through change. But we really need to know whether we've done it successfully. I've actually been skiing, and I was once that person. That isn't me, but I was once there, and I didn't make it down safely. I ended up in hospital with and had to have an operation because I didn't follow the path that people had gone before me. I didn't think about it long enough and hard about it. I wasn't experienced enough as a skier. And unfortunately, I became a cropper because of that. And I really, and now I'm so upset with myself, I suppose, because I was actually having a really good time skiing, but it ruined my whole holiday. I ended up in hospital, as I said, and had an operation, and I had months of therapy on my knee because of that silly moment of thinking, I don't need to follow everybody else's tracks. I can do this on my own. I don't need to plan. I don't need to be experienced enough to do this. This looks easy. And I just went ahead and didn't think about it, and I ended up in hospital. So, I really think that is a good example of why we need to actually look at who's gone before us and actually learn from other people and make sure that we put in enough planning and effort and practice before we actually leap off the side of the mountain. Now, change management is a huge topic in business today and in organisations. And now, if you searched for change management under Amazon, you'll find at least 43,000 books that have been written about change and change management. And if you put it into Google, you'll find over 805 million results. I mean, it's absolutely a massive subject, because so many people have thought about change, have tried to do change, have got different perspectives on how to do change well. And I mean, really, there's no shortage of people trying to find out the winning formula of change management. And you can find also in all these books and all these people like talking about change management, you will find all kinds of tips, tricks and perspectives out there. So it isn't like there's only one way that you do change management. There's lots of different ways and lots of different perspectives. But the trick is finding out what's going to work for you and your organization. And that's the key, really, is like looking through all of these books and perspectives and thinking about what is right for our organization and the people that work with us. And that's your task, really. So myth 2 is that a lot of organizations, they think that they need a change manager or a hero that's going to come in and solve all their problems. They think that they can't do it without someone who's going to actually do the change for them. And that's a very big myth, because there aren't change managers who walk in and solve all your problems. And I mean, I don't know about you, but maybe you're thinking, oh, we'll just wait for that new CEO, or we'll just wait for that new person on the board, or we'll just wait for that new team leader. They'll come in and they'll help us change things around here. Or maybe you think you've got to hire a consultant. Well, you don't. You don't have to wait for that very special person that's going to come in and change your organization for you. Okay, actual fact, don't wait for those people, because those people might be very influential, and they certainly might help the process, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having consultants or somebody coming in that's going to specialize in this area, but they don't do the change for you. You as an organization have to do it for yourself, and that involves everybody within the organization. And they need to know that change doesn't happen by one person alone. I've heard a wonderful story. It's a story about President John Kennedy when he visited NASA one day, and he was walking through the corridors of NASA when he came across a cleaner who was cleaning the corridors. And he just said to this cleaner, "Hi, my name's John Kennedy, President, and what's your job?" And the cleaner turned to the president and he said, "My job is to help put a man on the moon." And I don't know if that story is true, but the issue is that is a wonderful story that illustrates that the cleaners was in complete alignment with the goals and aims of NASA and the collective mission and strategy of what NASA was trying to do. He knew that he might be only a cleaner and he was just cleaning the corridors of NASA, but his job was part of to put people on the moon. He felt part of that aim and that goal. And, I wonder if you asked what your staff and your volunteers, if you asked them what their goal was, would they talk about the mission of your organisation? I mean, do they feel absolutely convinced that they're part of this strategy that you've got? Is their role part of the future of your organisation? Because if they don't really understand that mission and they don't really understand, how they're part of that and what their role means to that mission, then I'm wondering if you're in the best place, because they won't then look at change as an exciting way forward and helping you reach your mission. So it's a real, so I just love that story because I think it really challenges me to think about, does everybody in our organisation really understand how they fit into the big picture? You know, the truth is that different change management strategies work for different people. I'm not saying that you need a blanket approach. In fact, you absolutely don't. You need to think about the different people in your organization and what they're doing and what their role is, and then how they are part of the big picture. So you can't take a change management strategy and align it with maybe your service delivery staff. They might need a different strategy to what you would do with your maybe staff in head office. Okay, so what I'm saying is that you actually need a toolbox, not just one drill. You know, I've seen these drills that kind of do everything, but that doesn't work in an organization. You actually need a toolbox so that you can work with different people on their level and work out what's the right strategy for your different maybe even departments as well as individuals. So I don't want you to think that I don't think there's a person shouldn't be responsible for overseeing the change process. In fact, it's great to have a champion or a lead person for accountability, because if you're trying to implement change in your organization and there's no one person who's measuring what's happening and keeping an eye on, you know, whether it's working or what success or what challenges you're having, then sometimes nobody does it. So you really often do need someone who's going to champion the change, but don't think that it's all about them, up to them to make it happen. So just make sure that all your roles and responsibilities are clear, and ensure that everybody feels involved and they all feel part of the change and they know why it's happening. So myth 3 is people like to resist change. It might seem to you like people resist change all the time, or they just do it for no good reason. They just don't like change. And you know, it may seem like that because a lot of people do resist change. But when I ask people about change, more often than not, people really do like change. And so let me just ask that to you. Do you like change? Do you like change? So, you know, and you probably say to me, well, look, in certain circumstances, I do like change. Most people say that to me. They say, you know, they understand that change means growth, it means adventure, excitement, it can mean challenge, innovation, it means looking for better ways of doing things. So deep down, people usually know that change is good for them and their organisation. What they don't like is how change is managed. So if change is forced on them, if it's a surprise, or if it's done without any consultation, or if it's done differently to how they think it should be done, well, then they might start getting a little bit of resistance to change. So human beings are much better at adapting to a changed environment than they are being pushed into change. And we often don't acknowledge that enough. We think people have got to be, you know, either dragged, kicking and screaming, into doing things differently, or we think we've got to push them real quick so they don't even realise it. And we think, we hope that they won't even realise that some change has happened if we just kind of close their eyes and just give them a big push. But unfortunately, that's not the reality. And when we push people or we pull people, that's when resistance occurs. But when we adapt people to new environments, then they're much more likely to come without resistance. Change means transition. And I just want to sort of unpack this for you. What is change? You know, in terms of, you know, what is that transition that you're trying to create within your organization? It means leaving one place or a situation or how you're doing something now and moving to doing something differently. So I just want to ask you, how would you feel if you were told by your manager to get on a plane and go somewhere? How would you feel? Like, what would you ask? Well, probably the first thing you would say was, well, where am I going? Why? What am I doing there? You know, what have I got to take? Who am I going with? You know, is anybody coming with me? You'd have a whole heap of questions that you would want answered before you felt comfortable about just going to the airport and getting on a plane, because you need to feel comfortable about that. You'd want to know your answers to all of these questions. And, you know, asking people to change, asking people to transition to something completely new that they're not familiar with, that they've never been, a place where they've never been before, that might be a completely different culture to them, that's pretty scary to most people. So you can't expect them to not question you or to not come up with some, well, hang on a minute, why are we doing that? You know, that's normal, that's natural. We should allow them to do that, because if you're able to answer their questions, and if you're able to, you know, put their fears, you know, down, if you're able to, you know, answer their questions and make them feel safe about what the transition that you're asking them to do, then they're much more likely to go, okay, yeah, that sounds fun. All right, let's try it. Let's do it. Okay. So it's really about getting them on board. Now, let me just try something with you right now. And I know this is a webinar, so I know that this is a little bit difficult, but I'm just going to hope that you do this with me. Okay. I want you to extend your arms out straight for me. So just put your pen down for a moment and just put your arms out straight right in front of you. Okay, done that? So now you just fold them. Just fold your arms like this man on the screen. Okay. Did you do it? Okay, did that feel okay? Probably it did, because I just asked you to fold your arms, and you've probably done it 1,000 times before, if not 1,000,000 times, depending on how old you are. Okay, and so folding your arms is not a problem for you, and it doesn't feel uncomfortable because you've done it so many times before. So this time I want you to do it again. I want you to extend your arms. Put your arms right towards the computer. Okay, just extend them. Okay. Now this time I want you to fold your arms, but in the opposite direction to what you're used to. So the other way around. Okay, do you know what I'm saying? Like, put your other arm under. Okay, that way. Oh, yeah, right. Oh, that's harder, isn't it? Did you manage it? You had to think about it, didn't you? You had to kind of really go, okay, what goes where? Hang on a minute. Does that go under there? No, and it feels a bit awkward. Okay, because you're used to folding your arms in a certain way. You don't even think about how you fold your arms now. You just do it unconsciously. But if I asked you to do it in a different way, it feels awkward. It involves you consciously having to think about doing something differently. And it sometimes involves frustration. And I don't know how many of you actually managed to do that. You probably, I mean, it was a simple exercise, so you probably did. But if it was a more challenging type of change, you might give up and say, oh, no, that's too hard. You know, that's too challenging. I can't do that. You know, I don't want to do that. And you would just give up. And you can, that's okay now. Thanks for participating with me there. Okay, but I just wanted to do that little simple exercise with you to remind you, and it reminds me that change means breaking habits, and habits are really hard to break. So it's important for managers to carefully think through 4 key things. Number 1 is what the specific changes include. What are you actually asking people to do? And have you got really clear instructions on what you're asking them to do? Because, you know, they're going to get confused. And if you haven't got your instructions really clear, and if you haven't really told them everything that you want them to do, they're just going to go, I don't understand what she said. Number 2 is who the changes are going to impact. So don't ask people to change if you don't really need them to. I mean, you know, like, pick and choose carefully, you know, what these changes are and who's going to be involved in the changes, but know who you're asking and why. And then try to understand how it's going to impact them. Because if you don't think through that, you might come up with all sorts of risks and problems and resistance that you didn't even really think through properly. So try and plan what types of impact it might have them on how you can mitigate, I suppose, those risks. And then actually try and think through how people are going to react to this change. So try and put yourself in their shoes for a moment and think about, you know, well, how would I react if I was this person and I was being asked to do something completely different, or I was asked to be something change in the way that they deliver their service, or their shift times, or anything that you're trying to change. Think about it from their perspective, and trying to put yourself in your shoes and think about why they might resist those changes. Because if you can understand that, then you can start to create a plan of action for implementing some smooth transition to the new changes. Now, it's not just big changes, okay? Don't think change management only has to happen for those really big things that happen in your organization. Small changes can be just as bad as large changes. So don't ever think, oh, this is only just a little small adjustment to how we do things, oh, they won't even really notice this is a little change. Don't be fooled. People, sometimes those little changes are just as big as the big changes to you, because a little change might feel big to someone because it might be the 100th little change that you've made this month, and that might be what that might crack it, okay, on the 100th little change that you asked them to do this month or this year. So don't think that little changes aren't just as important to manage as big changes. Otherwise, you could be heading for disaster, like this little guy coming out of the aeroplane right here. So, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of your employees just for a moment and ask yourself, what would you do? What questions would you have if you were being asked to undertake some change? And the best way that you can decrease this resistance to change that you're likely to see in your team is asking, what questions will they have? This quote here says, the top reason for resistance among employees is a lack of awareness of the need for change. So why is the change taking place, and how's it going to benefit me? Because unfortunately, we all have ourselves at heart. We all want things to benefit ourselves. However much we love our clients, we love our job, we love our organization, unfortunately, at the end of the day, we still want to know how the change is going to benefit us. So my advice is that to answer these questions and the questions that are coming from your team, you need to be honest, you need to be upfront, and you need to be really clear. So I suspect that none of your staff or your volunteers are toddlers. I very much doubt that they are even under 16. They are usually adults, and all adults, and even children actually, but we're talking about an adult population that's in your workforce. And adults want respect, and they need to be appreciated. So it's only fair that you treat them with respect and you tell them the truth. Because I've seen it in many organizations when leaders have kind of said, oh, we won't tell them the whole truth, or we won't tell them the truth till after it's happened, or we'll just kind of keep this from them, or whatever. Now, I'm not saying there's not a right way of telling them the truth, okay? You sometimes have to be very gentle with people, and you have to frame it in a way that they understand. But the reality is, if that you're not clear and upfront with people, and you're not respectful to the fact that they need to be trusted and they need to be treated like adults, then they really will more likely resist you and not trust you. And then anything you say, they're not going to trust then. So you've lost your respect, and then they're going to resist everything that you ask them to do. So it's really important that you're clear and you're honest with them. Okay, the fourth myth is some people think that you have to have a clear goal before you change. All right, now why is this a myth then? Because it's not often the finish line that motivates people, is it? It can help. It certainly can help to have that, final end goal of what you're trying to achieve. But it doesn't really work in business and in the sector like that, really. Because goals are changing all the time because, you know, the environment is changing, your situation is changing, your funding is changing, your people are changing. There's so many other factors going on that having a long-term strategic goal that's like 5 years, and this is why, you know, you have to have your short-term goals as well as your long-term goals, because it's not the long-term goal, the strategic goal that you want to achieve in 5 years that keeps people going all the time, especially if it's a long and challenging journey. I just want to ask you, have you ever had a New Year's resolution? You know, you start on January 1st and you say, yes, this is my New Year's resolution. I am going to achieve this year. You know, it's going to take me 6 to 12 months, but I'm going to do this. Well, how many weeks did it take before you went, oh no, I've given up? Okay, they say that most people give up their New Year's resolutions within 4 weeks. That the long-term goal does not sustain people's motivation. They need more than just that end goal to keep them motivated and on track. And Gallup Management Journal's journal did an employee engagement survey. And they found that only 29% of employees are actively motivated and engaged in their jobs. And 71% are unmotivated and disengaged. You know, so they're either not engaged at all or they're actively disengaged. So, you know, what does that mean for organisations? Is if up to 70% of your staff are not engaged, they're not motivated about your long-term goal. They don't feel part of, you know, that long-term mission because it just feels too far away, or they just don't know how they're part of achieving that goal. If that's happening in your organization, and I wonder how many people of you could tell me how many of your staff are engaged or disengaged, but if that's the truth in your organization, you could be heading for trouble. And you might be wondering why all these people are resisting change. And you think, well, everybody looks happy, but why are they so, you know, disgruntled, and why are they not doing what we're asking them to do? And it could be that there's a lot of people who are disengaged. Well, they've studied motivation for years. It's a very big, interesting subject in academia and in business. And they found out that employees have a set of needs, okay? And it's not usually money, okay? Money is one of the factors, but it's definitely not the top motivating factor that keeps people engaged in your organization. And in fact, money and pay is the most expensive way to motivate people, which we don't really have that in the non-profit sector, okay? We're usually on a very limited ability to pay people good salaries. So we have to try and look at what are the other ways that we can motivate them. So these are the benefits, okay? They address individual needs and values. And the first one is interesting work. If people really feel that what they're learning and what they're gaining from work is challenging and interesting, and it's helping them grow, okay, that's really motivating to people. They want to get to work, and they want to work with their colleagues, and they want to learn something new. And the second one is appreciation. They actually want to feel a valued member of the team. So if you can actually communicate that to your team, and as I say, it doesn't have to be through money. There's lots of other ways that you can appreciate people and their role in what's going on in your organization. And the third one is promotion and growth. You know, people want to know how well they're doing. They want feedback. They want appraisals, and they want them to be beneficial though. They want them to be constructive feedback. I've had people say to me, I've not had an appraisal for 3 years. You know, nobody sits down and actually says, look, you're doing really well in this area, but you could improve here. You know, shall we send you some training here? Where would you like to learn more about here? You know, we just don't do it enough with our staff and volunteers, because people are very motivated by learning more and growing as individuals. And the fourth one is job security, which is very hard to do in the non-profit sector, but we need to try and do it as well as we can by saying, you know, we want you to stick around. You know, if you're a good employee, if we've evaluated you and we appreciate for what you bring to this organization, we actually want you to stay around and be part of what we're doing here. So there's no question that motivated employees are more productive, they're more creative, and they add more overall value to the organization than, you know, just doing what it takes. You know, you don't want all your employees just to turn up, do their work, go home again. I mean, that's not going to grow your organization. That's not going to build your organization, and it's not going to actually increase morale. So, you know, you need to find out how you're doing at least these 4 things and do it really, really well in your organization, because I'm pretty sure that you will increase your morale, you'll increase productivity, you'll increase, you know, people wanting to work for you, and you will decrease turnover when people feel motivated to stick around and be part of what you're doing in your organization. Now, what are the things that actually is bad for your organization and change when change is happening? Okay, here's the 4 things. Number 1, poor communication. When you do this badly, or when you do it in an authoritarian way, so when you're shouting at people and saying, do this, we're making this change, when it's not consultative and empowering and, you know, valuing and respectful, then of course people are going to get a little bit ticked off. They're not going to really enjoy that type of communication. Low engagement. So, you know, when you notice that people are not sticking around, they're turning up late, they're, you know, not coming in, they're you know, they're not meeting their KPIs, you know, they're just like they're there in their body, but they're not really there in their mind, or they're, you know, then you can really tell that they are not motivated. And the 3rd one is poor skills and experience. So when you hire people, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't matter if you've got to grow them and develop them and give them those skills. But when you see people who are not building their resume whilst they're with you, then you've got to wonder what you're doing. You've really got to be looking at their resume and saying, you know, how are you building your resume? How are you preparing yourself for the next move? Because when you know that you're building people's resume, then you know that they're really learning a lot, and they're going to training, and they're being encouraged to learn new things, and you know, that's helping them in their growth and their opportunity for development. And of course, poor relationships and disconnection. Okay, so when people are not getting on, there's lots of conflict, people are just not enjoying being with their team, you know that they're not going to be very willing to change, because they are just don't want to be around the people that they're working with, which is terribly sad for people, and they're going to be disengaged. So all of these factors are going to be barriers for people to absorb and cope with change. If this is happening in your organization, you need to fix this fast, because people are going to resist change like you've never seen it, because they just don't trust you, they don't respect you, they don't see the point, they're not motivated to make changes. So I want you to write this down and think about what's going on in our organization and how can we fix some of these problems before we even think about asking people to do some change. So it's really about giving people a vision, okay, not a finish line, okay. It's not about saying this is the goal and we have to meet this goal. It's really about the vision for that future, and helping people to see how they are part of that vision. And I'm not referring to kind of a corporate statement about, you know, we're going to save the world. You know, look, that'd be really lovely. But you really need to think about in terms of a motivating vision that's people are really, they buy into. Okay, so it's a clearly articulated, emotionally charged picture of what the organization is achieving, but not so broad that it's just kind of like unachievable, save the world. I mean, you actually want to talk about the population that you work with. You know, it's centered around your mission statement, but a bit more specific than that. Okay, so it's not a goal that you're going to meet in, you know, 6 months. It's about something that you're going to do over the long term, but you've all got to work towards this long-term vision. So it's really important then, just to recap, that you build a culture of learning, trust, and accountability. And the most successful organizations that manage change are the ones that are change-ready cultures. And how you do this and how you foster this culture in your organization is you can do 4 things. You can ask people to be curious and eager to learn. You can hold people accountable and tell them what you expect. They shouldn't mind that, because if they are really bought in to what your vision is and that they are feeling appreciated, they don't mind to be held accountable. Okay, you've got to wonder why if they're not. Okay, if they're telling you, oh, you know, I didn't do this and I don't care, then you got to, it's telling you they're disengaged. You make sure that managers and the organisation is trustworthy. Okay, because people will not change. They'll be resistant to change if they don't trust anything that you say. So, you know, you've got to speak and act with integrity all the time, because people are watching you all the time, and it's going to get out if you're not telling the truth, or if you're trying to, you know, go around the houses, or, you know, if you're just not doing things with integrity, you will be found out. And find out what motivates your people and gives them satisfaction, job satisfaction, you know, because all people are different, and what might be motivating to one, you know, team down the road might be different to what motivates your team. So find out. Now you can do surveys, or you can do interviews, or you can just do it in their appraisals, you know, but find out, use a strategy to find out what motivates people, and then act on that. You know, actually try and motivate them, whether it's more training and development, whether it's more performance management and feedback, whether it's more acts of appreciation. Okay, you can do that, because you know that the knock-on effect of that is job satisfaction. And when people are satisfied in their job and they feel excited about their job, then they're much more likely to cope with change and want change to happen in your organisation. Here's a few little things that you can do. Here's some ideas. Okay, so down the engagement side is around, you know, you can do awards and newsletters, you can do success stories, surveys, consultations, celebrations, and networking. Those are just a couple of ideas that you can do to engage your staff and to kind of really communicate with them in a way that they feel appreciated and they feel part of the story that your organisation is creating. And how you develop your culture is you do things like training and development opportunities. You can set up peer support groups within your organisation, or even without external to your organisation. Make sure that you do supervision and feedback, okay, regularly. Okay, you might have to do an appraisal, you know, once a year or once every 6 months, but do supervision and feedback regularly, so that people are always, you know, getting feedback and hearing about what they're doing well and what they need to improve, and how you're going to help them to improve on their weaknesses or the things that challenge them. Make sure that everybody has really clear job descriptions. I'm surprised at how many organisations, you know, they might have them, but they haven't looked at them for 6 years, or they just don't have them at all. Especially volunteers as well. Just because volunteers aren't paid, that doesn't mean that sometimes they need a job description to tell them, you know, what they're here for and what they're doing, and, you know, what their role is. So role clarity is absolutely essential. Policies and procedures, of course, that helps you guide your staff, and it gives them boundaries and a guidance around how you want things to work in your organisation and how you want them to do things. So it's very important. They don't have to be big and complicated sometimes. It's just about guidance and giving them some structure. Allow time for your staff to experiment and be innovative in your organisation. You know, how many times this year have you sat down and just said, hey, let's have a morning tea and think about ways that we can improve how we, you know, the service delivery that we're doing, or how we're managing this organisation. You know, how often do you just give people space to be creative and actually come up with some ideas themselves, rather than it always being from the manager who's like telling them what he or she thinks you know, you should do and how you should change. And communicate successes and achievements. Actually, you know, thank people for what they're doing. Thank them for being part of the journey that you're on. You know, thank them for being part of the successes and the achievements that you're making, either as a team or as an organisation. So, you know, that's how you build culture and how you build a change-ready culture. because this is all about believing in people and getting to know people and getting to know and communicating how they are part of where your organization is going. So if you're focused on getting people to be happy about their job and feeling supported to make the change that you want them to, even if it's challenging or difficult, they will do it much more readily. So, give your team some time, some ideas to come up with this change and build this culture in a way. So is your culture influencing how people respond to change? I just want to ask that question to you right now. Just think about it. Is your culture, is the way that you do things, is your policy, your procedures, your appraisals, your job descriptions, your newsletters, even your branding, is everything about your organization influencing how people respond to change? Is it keeping them in the dark ages? Is it holding them back? Is it not allowing them to be innovative and creative? Or are you looking at ways of how you can encourage them to make change? So my recommendation this month is that you seriously look at your current culture and you ask yourself if that culture is encouraging or hindering change, no matter what that change is, whether it's the smallest type of change or whether it's the big change that you're planning. If there are some improvements to be made, if you recognize that your culture is not as good as it could be, then you need to plan some strategies that are going to motivate and support people. So focus on job satisfaction, focus on building that culture of trust and accountability and integrity. Because if you focus on that and then you ask them to change, your change is much more likely to be successful. So here's some real quick keys to success. Manage change. Don't wait for chance. Don't just wait for change and hope for the best. Actually put some planning into place and think about how you're going to manage change. Engage everyone to be leaders of change. It's really important that everybody sees themselves part of this change, not just the one hero that you've employed to do this. Minimize resistance, but do that by building that culture and by looking at what, understanding people and what they're going to need, what resources and training and encouragement and support they're going to need to make some change. Give people a vision to work towards. Make sure that they know why you're implementing change and help them see that change is just part of that vision. It's part of making sure that you are successful as an organization. Communicate the benefits of change, and not just to your organization, but to them as individuals. Actually go to them one by one if you need to. If you've got a small team, it might be good for you to actually sit down with them one by one and actually talk about how the change is going to benefit them personally. And overall, build a culture of learning, trust, and accountability. Because if you're doing that, you're building a culture that's going to be ready for change and eager for change. And you will absolutely lower the resistance to change. I love this quote from Mark Twain. He said, 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do than by the ones that you did do. So throw off the bowline, sail away from the safe harbour, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream and discover. So, we know that change is good for us. It's exciting. It's adventure. It's about creating success for you and your team. So don't hold back. Change is good. You don't want to be stuck in the dark ages because your organization will not survive. You need to be changing all the time. But to do that well, you need to do it in a coordinated and thoughtful process. And that's how it's going to be successful for you. So thank you so much for that webinar, coming to our webinar today. I hope you've enjoyed it, got some ideas out of that. If you've got any questions, please email me. But please connect me on Facebook. I'm going to be putting a few things up on Facebook about change over the next few weeks. Just come and connect with me there. And I look forward to seeing you next time. See you now.